very packed schedule, considering that we started a bit late. We have a plan to have 2 presentations before lunch, covering logistics and agriculture, and 2 presentations after lunch, which cover basically an industry case study, down industry, and a presentation by the University of Chiang Mai, a special school in basically supply chain. It should end by 5:30, if I'm not mistaken. So I'll keep my remarks short, just to introduce the broad framework or context with which this workshop is taking place. In the last couple of years in particular, supply chains have become a major concern for industry around the world. This has largely been occasioned by 2 factors. One is a massive political and economic decoupling between China and the US. Started under President Trump and gaining momentum under Biden. And this progressive move by the US and its European allies to withdraw or reduce their dependence upon China's massive role in global trade, and specifically in the production of a whole range of goods, industrial, consumer, etc., on which the West critically depends. The second is COVID. COVID has disrupted business around the world, and again China's ridiculous zero COVID policies has led to massive shutdowns of their key industrial centers along the East Coast, and as a result of which, businesses have started talking about building resilient supply chains. But that term tends to be understood mostly as a defensive strategy. So it's China plus 1, China plus Vietnam, China plus Bangladesh, China plus Indonesia. In other words, we need to find alternative suppliers in case there's problems in China. Yeah? And there's very good reasons to fear what's happening in China, because China has become so central to global trade, to most manufacturing processes everywhere in the world, including India, that what happens in China now could completely destroy a business and make it unviable. So this is the background. Of course, the war in Ukraine, first war since war between European countries since the Second World War, has made matters worse by disrupting global energy supplies, food supplies, and similarly, sanctions against these countries are going to lead to a further trend towards protectionism and trade barriers, all of which are kind of recasting the way in which business has conducted itself over the last, say, 20, 30 years, where the trend was towards globalization, cross-border dependencies, freedom of movement of goods, freedom of movement of capital, freedom of movement of people. So this is the way in which business has responded. It's kind of commonsensical thing. If you can't do business with China, find an alternative supplier. But this looks at supply chain resilience in a very narrow sense. There's a much deeper sense, even without these crises, in which business has to rethink the way it structures its practices globally. Now, large companies, especially MNCs in the West, have basically been subject to tremendous pressure from their own communities, from shareholders, workers, stakeholders, consumers, to clean up their act. So in the West, these companies have basically become far more ethical in the way they do business, far more sensitive to the impact their practices have upon the environment, the way they treat their workers. Okay? Basically, it's introduced a level of ethics into conducting business, which now has started permeating the entire supply chain. So what happens is a company that sources from other countries, whether from India or Indonesia or Mexico, the first-tier suppliers are coming under pressure from the contractor, that is the main company, to basically adopt similar practices. And this was the idea of creating sustainability in the supply chains, where the best practices of the purchasing company, cascades into the next layer, and the first-tier supplier similarly insists on his suppliers following best practice. Remember, in today's manufacturing world, 80%, maybe even more, of the components and the value that's basically produced by the final producer is outsourced. So these are not just supply chains in the narrow sense of I buy some product from someone else and process it and sell it to someone else. Today you have a network. It's better to understand it as supply networks, where hundreds of companies collaborate to produce the final product. It's very similar to the Japanese model of Kairitsu, where the parent company actually takes equity stakes in its supplier chain. But here we're going one step further and saying, to create viable supply chains or create viable supply networks, companies must insist that every member of that network adheres to best practice. So the short point is, a really resilient supply chain is one that basically treats all its stakeholders and the environment with respect. Yeah? So, and this is not out of any altruism. Companies that have neglected this have faced massive shareholder actions, massive legal actions, litigation. They faced regulatory sanctions. They faced a loss of reputation. And finally, they basically have had to pay the price of huge environmental damage that their suppliers' malpractices have caused. So it's an interest of business basically to make sure that best practice in every area of business permeates the whole supply level. We've chosen a few examples which are critical to public well-being to illustrate this. The first is logistics. In fact, logistics is the basis on which the whole machine works every step of the way. Transportation of goods, cross-border movements are all basically run in varying degrees of competence, varying degrees of sustainability. So our first speaker today is going to talk about how do you build a sustainable and ethical or equitable logistical system. The second presentation is something that's vital to our country, which is basically agriculture. These are the two sessions we planned before lunch. After lunch, we have the case study of the garment industry, and finally the presentation from Chiang Mai. They've got a model called the SCAN model, which they will present to us online. So just to wrap it up, since we are running a bit late, the basic point we're making is that if you are going to do business in this world today, you're increasingly going to take responsibility for the people you do business with, for the people you purchase from, and ensure that their practices correspond to your best. So the whole system is gradually transformed by catalysts in the form of the biggest companies in the world, whose reputations ultimately depend upon the behavior of everybody in their network. Yeah? Thanks a lot.